I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, brought to you by the Pigskin Podcast Network. You can find them at PigskinPodNet on Twitter, or you can search the hashtag TPPN. Matt is here with me. We're going to recap the Saints-Buccaneers game, talk a little news and notes, and we will preview the Thursday night football game. Matt, how's everything been going for you up in... Is it probably cold, Colorado at the moment? I don't know. This weather's been crazy. It was cold. I had a sweatshirt on. Now it's hot. I don't know what's going on anymore.
I mean, it was supposedly 50 degrees today. I've been so busy. I've been in my office. So in my office, it's 69 degrees. So it's pretty nice.
Yeah, nice. That's exactly what you're supposed to say after someone says 69. All right, let's talk a little bit here about this Monday night football game where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are able to hold off and beat the New Orleans Saints 17-16. I feel like we talked a little bit about this during the preseason, during the season. Like, the Saints seemed to think they were a team that could compete. I distinctly remember saying they probably should just rebuild, tear it down, trade Kamara, everybody they could, and try and rebuild here quickly. Like, what are you expecting of them now? I mean, I know Andy Dalton's getting a lot of hate. I don't necessarily think he's the issue here with the Saints, but they're just not a good, I shouldn't say they're not a good, they're not a great football team. They're not a playoff team.
Yeah, I mean, we aren't seeing incredible production out of the run game. They've had massive injuries up and down the offensive line. Taysom Hill is not non-ironically a focal point of the offense at tight end. Juwan Johnson was out. Michael Thomas was supposed to be back this year. We were supposed to get, Jarvis Landry in there. Neither of them have really been a factor. I like what Chris Olave is doing. And I liked the chemistry that Dalton was developing with Johnson. It's unfortunate he's not out there, but that Adam Troutman pick doesn't look like it hit. Defensively, we've seen them fall off a little bit. They've been missing a lot of people too. We missed the Marshawn Lattimore, Mike Evans ejection from Monday night because Marshawn couldn't get on the field. They, even despite all that, they should have won that game. That, they were up 16-3 with 3 minutes left. That's not really, in my opinion, on Dalton. Great defensive play by the Buccaneers to knock away that pass to Taysom Hill. Maybe you question the call that they made there, but Andy Dalton made a beautiful throw to Hill that if he holds on to that ball, the Buccaneers can't get it back. As someone who watched their own team lead for, 59 and a half minutes before giving up the ghost with 28 seconds left, I felt the Saints' pain.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that I've felt that too for a lot of this year with the Browns leading almost the entire game and then giving up the lead, and then Jacoby Brissett getting them right down there, right as they're about to win it, and then throws an interception. Something happened, but yeah, it's a weird team. They're like in this weird. I almost feel like their roster is either really old or really young. I don't feel like there's a good middle group here for the Saints. I'm going to be very curious to see what they do because I believe Dalton can become a free agent after this year. I want to say Winston still technically has one more year on his deal, but it doesn't feel like they want to go back to Winston. They have not played him practically all season after he got what's the word I'm looking for here? baseball player who got replaced. I can't
Wally
remember.
pipped.
Yeah, feels like he got Wally pipped by Andy
he got
Dalton.
Phil Simms. That's what happened to
Yeah.
Phil Simms. Jeff Ostel went to and won the Super Bowl for the Giants. Yeah, there's bad energy there. Ian Book looks like a worse choice all the time. They're in somewhat of salary cap hell. The real question, I think, for the Saints is they rode that middle ground this offseason that we saw some of these other teams do, like where the Falcons were a year ago, not wanting to just absorb a bunch of dead cap with a poor roster. So they tried to add a few pieces and push their chips in on getting back to the playoffs, and it just hasn't panned out for them. The question is this offseason, do you move on? That Michael Thomas contract looks worse every year we go forward. He just can't get on the field. The Jarvis Landry signing was kind of an exciting. He's going back home. It hasn't worked out. They have a good building piece in Olave, but they need help on the offensive line. We don't know what they're doing at quarterback. They might be well served to try to trade some of their top players to try to get picks. But is the franchise willing to do that, and what does that mean for Dennis Allen? Dennis Allen kind of got the hometown you were already here job, but I don't know if that provides a lot of job security.
Oh, am I back? I froze
you're
for
back.
A second.
I can tell if it's your
Okay. I was like, everything stopped. This is probably me. Yeah. All right, I'm going to be very curious to see what the Saints end up doing here. I don't think that they're in a good place. Yeah. Are we encouraged at all about the Buccaneers offense after this comeback?
I'm going to say I actually am encouraged because one thing we noted going in, and Dennis and I talked about this on Monday, is Tom Brady does not play well against the New Orleans Saints in the regular season. He hasn't since he went to Tampa Bay. Wins have been almost impossible to come by, even when Tampa Bay's had a much stronger team. So the fact that with 3 minutes left, after Brady had a minor meltdown on the sideline when they elected to punt at one point in time, that they were able to come back and get 2 touchdowns and pull out that win and get back to 6-6, I think is a great sign. They have a tough game against San Francisco, but they catch a little bit of a break in that Jimmy G is out. Now you can start piling up some wins, maybe building some momentum. We saw Atlanta lose again. Carolina is there, and this really kind of knocks the Saints out of it. So I think the Buccaneers are actually building a little momentum and securing their playoff spot. I was, they weren't incredible, but I did think it was a little encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's hard to doubt Brady, right? Even though he hasn't been, the Brady we've seen probably the last 2 decades, they have a tough schedule ahead of them, though. I mean, 49ers, maybe a winnable game now with Brock Purdy at quarterback, not having Jimmy G. And then you get the Bengals. Cardinals is probably, I'll take that back. I didn't realize. Then Cardinals, Panthers, Falcons. Those are all winnable games. So, yeah, this is a big win for them, and they could very easily be vaulting themselves forward. They were the leaders in the the NFC South, correct?
They were already the leaders, and now they will have, because the Falcons and the Saints have late buys. Saints and Panthers are on 4 wins. Falcons are on 5 wins, but they have 8 losses, so they're 2 back in the loss column. So they're 2.5 games back, I believe. I think they're shaping up. They can open that to, or they're a game and a half back. They can open that to a full 2-game lead if they get a win on Sunday and move to 7-6.
All right, so some news has come out over the past couple days. We're going to go through all of those really quick. The first one, Baker Mayfield was claimed by the Los Angeles Rams, was cut, was it Tuesday? Monday?
Yeah, Monday. It was kind of a surprise, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't know. It's not been great. I think he kind of asked for it, too. He said if they're not going to start him to let him go. They cut him. The Rams grab him, which makes some sense in the fact that obviously they don't have a quarterback. Matt Stafford dealing with a spinal contusion and concussions, probably done for the season. We can't expect Baker to play tomorrow, right? With him just now signing is going to be John Walford.
John Walford has a neck injury. That was part of why they went out and got Baker Mayfield. So I think the option was either Bryce Perkins I know Walford's technically listed as questionable, but they said there was a neck injury, and it's very possible he's going to have to go on season-ending IR. Stafford is on IR. You wouldn't think they would put Baker out there, but I have no idea.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting because I can't imagine the Panthers or the Browns ever ran any kind of offense the way that Sean McVay did. So you're talking about him getting in there today and having 2 days to be prepared for this. The Raiders have been a not so great team, but still to throw them out there 2 days in like that seems insane to me. I would be very surprised if they end up doing that, but we will find out. I mean, they may not have a choice if John Walford is not able to play in this game.
Well, you could get, I guess, a steady dose of Bryce Perkins. The Rams are not really playing for anything. They're 3-9. They have no receivers. He might actually be going to a worse offensive setup and situation than he had in Carolina, which is almost hard.
Oh, he for sure is. And I also think that kind of sucks for him because this is probably his last chance to like do anything or like try and reboost his draft stock, right? Like he's never going to, I think, become or at least what I hoped he was going to be after he got drafted. But I mean, like, we've already know this dude struggles when he gets pressure and the offensive line's not good. And the Rams probably have arguably the worst one in the NFL at the moment, maybe outside the Texans. So I don't know that it's going to help him much there. Like I'm a little bit worried for my boy Baker Mayfield. So Von Miller injured his knee. I feel like that was 3 or 4 weeks ago. He had said that he was hopefully going to be able to come back and play this year. It does not look like that is going to happen. It has now been announced that he is out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that was a shocking turn of events for Vaughn because, I remember at one point in time they were talking about him. He was himself talking about just taking 10 days off to rest and then playing in this Jets game. Then they put him on IR, which I thought was a little bit surprising. And then today, now they're saying it's a torn ACL, so obviously they found something on further testing that is pretty grim. And I think that's a blow for Buffalo. Kind of a bummer for Vaughn. I imagine if they won the Super Bowl, he'd still get that Super Bowl ring. But I know he was excited to potentially play in a Super Bowl, his third Super Bowl with his third different team.
I don't know what is going on here, but this is driving me crazy. Jimmy G unfortunately injures his ankle and did it come out that he had ligament damage?
Foot. He broke his foot. They had thought, I think, that he had a Liz Frank injury, and instead now he doesn't have a Liz Frank injury. So there is an outside. Yesterday there's an outside chance he could be back for the playoffs. I saw an updated report today that says that's murky. I believe that we should still pretty much consider him out for the year. For the purposes of what they were talking about, the outside shot he had at returning would be like late January, which means that the 49ers, who are tracking to play on wild card weekend, would probably have to have a wild card game playing without him. So I would think, if you're trying to plan for everything, then I'm not planning on Jimmy G, which leaves them in an interesting situation. They have Brock Purdy out there. He's going to start this week. I thought he looked somewhat decent when he came off the bench against the Dolphins. Was Mr. Irrelevant, so that's kind of a unique and different thing. They also pulled veteran Josh Johnson. He was on Denver Broncos practice squad, so I guess that's an option. But for a team that pushed a lot of things in to make a Super Bowl this year, that's certainly a blow. And for us, for fantasy purposes, we won't see Jimmy G. To me, when I was looking at rankings this week, I sort of downgraded the receivers. I would think this might be a little more pressure on Christian McCaffrey and the running game. Not a easy matchup this week as they go in against Tampa Bay. Matt, step away for a minute, but also up on there is Odell Beckham Jr. We keep getting told at some point he's going to sign. He's done a tour now. He stopped in Buffalo. He stopped and met with the Giants. And most recently on Monday, he met with the Dallas Cowboys. It seems like it came out from the Cowboys that they have concerns about whether he's actually ready to be back on the field. And that has been a question all along. OBJ obviously tore that ACL during the Super Bowl, which was in last February. A lot of people thought he wouldn't be able to return until early December at the earliest. Now people are saying he wouldn't actually be ready to play on that until some point in January. And I think that's why there's some hedging. I still think he's going to end up signing somewhere. Where that somewhere is difficult to say. Buffalo Bills would be interesting in that they probably don't need him right away. With the way Michael Gallup played on Sunday night, the Cowboys might be feeling a little bit better about their receiver prospects. It's also looking like James Washington is really close to returning, so that gives the Cowboys some more depth. And the question I would have with the Giants is probably whether Odell Beckham could do enough to help the Giants. So still seems like there's interest in him. The big question is which of those three teams would be willing to pull the trigger. And now with the new reports that he might not be ready to play until mid-January, I think this pretty much means those that were holding on, hoping for like a late season or playoff boost from OBJ can probably let go of that. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Matt. Disappeared again. The final news and notes in a little bit of a surprising move. The Tennessee Titans fired their general manager, John Robinson. And we only say it's surprising because the Titans are currently 7-5 and in first place in the AFC South. They look like a near lock to win the AFC South and make and have a great shot at making the playoffs. So it's kind of a little bit surprising, but then again, it isn't. One of the things, if you were here on Monday, Dennis and I talked about the Titans and their roster, and they've had a real struggle with some lack of talent, not being able to put together a lot of skill position players on offense. And I think that's taken a real toll on the Titans and their ability to compete. So I think this is maybe a little bit of a commentary that while they like the job that Mike Vrabel is doing as head coach and that they've been able to compete, they don't feel like the roster is in the shape that it needs to be. So the Titans electing to move on from John Robinson. Be curious to see who they get and to see if their philosophy changes. They're a team that for a couple of years now has really done, I guess, addition by subtraction in terms of wide receivers. They let A.J. Brown go. They tried to bring in Robert Woods. That didn't really work. The draft pick of Treylon Burks seems like a good one. He's had trouble staying on the field. I actually kind of liked the potential of the guys they brought in this offseason, but it really hasn't worked. And I think this must just be a statement that they're not happy with the direction of the roster. I don't know. You're not a big fan of Tennessee's offense either.
No, I'm not. But I think this is probably a vote of confidence toward Vrabel. Although I'm going to be interested to see what happens now with the GM that they hire, because typically when the GMs are gone, even if you bring in a new one typically beforehand, like they want to bring in their own coach, if you have a old coach held over and they bring in those GMs and it's not their guy, it typically doesn't work out. So I'm very curious to see what this means for Vrabel. I mean, again, they're having a much better season than I expected them to. Like I'm pretty sure I picked them to be last place or right with the Texans in last place in the AFC South. They're at 7-5. They're probably going to make the playoffs again because they're going to win the AFC South. Like nobody else is going to challenge in that division. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't think that they've been horrible drafting. I'm sure some of this is probably has something to do with the trade of A.J. Brown, too, would be my guess. I imagine that probably didn't help.
They've had a lot of signings and draft picks that haven't panned out. And so, to me, we're really impressed with what Mike Vrabel's been able to do considering what we've given him. It feels like that's kind of the move that's going on here. You've seen them not be able to hold on to players, and some of the moves they made, even on defense, some of the draft picks that they've tried to make haven't panned out. Going and getting Bud Dupree hasn't exactly panned out the way they thought it was going to. They hemorrhaged offensive linemen this offseason. A couple of their big offensive linemen are now churning things up for Buffalo, which has been an improvement for them. And I think right now it feels like the Titans are placing a little bit of blame on the roster construction for the fact that they're a winning team, but they're 0-5 against teams that would be in the playoffs. They're 7-5 as a team, so that pretty well tells you you're on track to make the playoffs. Your division sucks, but you're not going to go anywhere.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can't, I guess, necessarily fault them for that. It's part of the reason why I've continued to pick them to be a bad team the past couple of years, and they've definitely outperformed their expectations. On OBJ's thing really quick, I just want to chime in since I'm having issues with my computer today, and I caught some of that. I do hope that he gets a chance to sign with someone because I'd just like to see him be able to go out on his own terms. But I think the fact that this is the second ACL in less than a year, like that's probably worrisome. I was really hoping he would land with the Cowboys just to get a chance to see him kind of get at least one more shot into the playoffs. I am happy he got a Super Bowl last year. That was great to see. Because if we're all being honest, he was, I think, the reason the Rams were going to run away with that Super Bowl win early on with how well he was performing. He went down and that Rams offense completely changed. Thursday night preview, we've got the Raiders and the Rams in this one. For the Raiders side here, Josh Jacobs is listed as questionable. Do you think that the Raiders can climb back into the playoff discussion?
You know, a few weeks ago I would have said no, but now they're 5-7. I still think it's a real long shot because I've thought for a while you need 10 wins to get into the playoffs, which would basically mean the Raiders have zero margin for error. They would need to win all the rest of their games. But it's fascinating. They seem to be surging. They've come back pretty big and caught up with the Chargers, who now look like they're kind of reeling and have a hard schedule. All of a sudden, you know, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I think most of us think the Raiders have a better chance on Thursday night. They could be looking at being 6-7. This is kind of the position they were in last year where we thought, oh, you know, they've missed it, and they really surged at the end, put together all these wins and snuck into the playoffs. Would they be able to make much of a run or make much hay in the playoffs? You know, probably not, but they do seem like they can get back up. And, you know, I think we all going into the season thought that they were a candidate to have 8 to 10 wins. And if they get in that 9-10 win range, that could be enough with how competitive and how bunched the AFC is becoming to potentially get in there. And they, I think, now have the tiebreaker over the Chargers, who just, I don't know what's going on with the Chargers.
I don't either. It's very frustrating as someone who I believe I picked him to get to the AFC Championship game. Maybe I picked him to get to the Super Bowl. I can't remember, but I know I had him going far. I think the injuries are definitely a part of it, but my goodness, I just can't. I can't. I like the name change there. Okay, what did I change my name to? I don't know. But yeah, it's just been very frustrating for the Chargers, but I'm with you. I mean, they could, I guess, technically get back in it. What did you say? They're 4-7 right now? 5-7?
Yeah.
So I mean,
they're 5-7. I'm picking the Raiders tomorrow. Dennis is too. I'd be shocked, honestly, if the Rams won at this point in time because they seem to have nothing going on. That would put them at 6-7. Let's look at their schedule real quick. The thing is, you know, we're seeing now the Ravens look like they might have a similar problem to what they had last year because they seemingly can't win without Lamar. They have the Rams, then they get a 10-day layoff, and they're at the Patriots. That becomes a really crucial game because both those teams are really fighting for a last playoff spot. They have at the Steelers. They go to the 49ers, and again, you would have said 2 weeks ago, well, that's a loss, but they're home against the 49ers. What are the 49ers going to look like with Brock Purdy? And we know the Raiders have been consistently putting up points. And then it comes down to the final game of the season where they're playing the Chiefs. And if the Chiefs have already kind of locked in their seed, it's potential they don't have anything to play for. So when you start looking at that schedule, if they can get that win against the Patriots and they win as you would expect them to win against the Rams and the Steelers, you know, 3 more wins would have them at 8-7, and then you're looking at potentially being on the cusp and the way everything's going in the AFC. You've seen the AFC East. I would wager quite a few of those teams are going to be right around 500 now.
Yeah.
The Bengals and the Ravens are fighting. I'm actually not putting it out of the realm of possibility the Steelers could climb back into it with the way they're playing and the way everything's tracking. I think they have a great chance to beat the Ravens on Sunday and move to 6-7 too. And you could be making a similar case for these. There are a lot of division games for all these teams down the stretch. I don't think the Chargers win on Sunday night, so they probably drop to 6-7. So now maybe you're opening the door to 9 wins getting you in, which is what ended up happening last year. We just had this huge pack of teams that all either surged at the end or faded at the end and kind of bunched up together. Jets, the Jets are a team that, given their schedule and some of the things, they have 7 wins already, but you could see them coming back to the pack. So you could see like the 6 and 7 seeds in the AFC kind of more in flux.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. I mean, I feel like even though they are still only 1 game up over the Jets with Miami and Cincinnati, who are 8-4, like I feel like they're somewhat safe at the 5 seed, right? Or 6. I'm sorry, Miami's at the 6 seed, right? They're sitting at 8-4 right now. I feel like they're somewhat safe to make the playoffs. But as you just mentioned, the Jets, who are in the 7 seed, and New England, who's currently in the 8 seed, Jets are 7-5, New England 6-6. And the Chargers are right outside of that at 6-6. Then the Raiders at 5-7, Cleveland at 5-7, Pitt at 5-7. I kind of feel like even though technically Indy and Jacksonville are still in it at 4-8, I kind of feel like they're out of it. So it's going to come down to the Chargers, Raiders, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. That's going to be very interesting watching that go. As you just mentioned, because the Raiders also have that massive matchup next week against New England, especially if they're able to get that win tomorrow night against the Rams. For the Rams side, Aaron Donald out, John Walford questionable. We just talked about earlier, they signed Baker Mayfield. I think if we see him, the Rams are already in a bad spot. If Baker's forced to go out there, I think it's going to look really, really bad.
Yeah, I guess the question. So I don't think he starts because I don't know how a guy that's been on the roster for 30 hours starts. If he's active, I guess a little bit is going to be what happens to John Walford too, because when you start talking about a neck injury, that's really not something you want to mess with. It sounded like the way they were talking was there was a lot of concern that Walford needed to also go on IR. Then is Baker just an emergency quarterback? If this game ends up getting lopsided, do they put him in to let him run a few plays against live action to see what he can do? I mean, they essentially have, you would almost call it a preseason level lineup that they're rolling out there anyway, because the Rams have offensive line issues. They're missing their 2 marquee receivers. Not entirely sure what they're doing in the backfield. So I actually would put the odds probably more like 50-50 for seeing Baker. I think if the game was on Sunday, I'd put it at 100% we see Baker.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I'm rooting for him. I'm hoping that he's able to go out there and at least do something, but bad offensive line, no real weapons around him. Like, he just left a bad situation go to a worse situation. The only thing I can think of is maybe because the Rams have no draft picks whatsoever, and maybe they think Matt Stafford might be retiring after everything going on with him this year, that they're hoping to hold on to Baker to keep him as like a stopgap for a year, but I don't know how great an idea even that is. Like, it's going to be bad right now, I think.
Well, the other reason I think that they might put him out there is, from what I gathered, the Rams have a pretty complex offensive system that they've had to take back several levels because of the quarterbacks that they've had to put out there. So having a simplified system, I don't know. This has not been the season I expected for the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, nah, I'm right there with you. I'm pretty sure I had them comfortably winning the NFC.
Dennis had the Rams Chargers in the Super Bowl. We talked about it on Monday. It's just been oh my God.
Yeah. So you mentioned you and Dennis are both taking the Raiders, as am I. Hopefully a good game tomorrow night. Hopefully my internet will be working on Friday because I'm having all kinds of issues over here. It's really starting. I'm about to like throw my hand through this computer because I do not know what is going on. But we will be back on Friday, Dennis, Matt, and myself, to recap that Thursday night game and preview the rest of Week 14, the last week of the regular season, getting ready for the fantasy playoffs. It's almost over with.
Yep.
All right. We'll talk to you guys again on Friday. Everybody have a great day.